Well, ASSOB compared to other funding options for growing Australian companies is really, I guess, chalk and cheese. The way ASSOB's been structured for growing companies is really twofold. One, fundamentally we don't take an equity position in the company, and two, our whole business model is predicated upon the success of the capital raising for the company. So if I can explain or go into detail on both those fronts. If we look at the options out there first and foremost for growing Australian companies, you've got debt funding, you've got self-funded growth, or you've got equity funding. Now, at the moment, with the way the credit lending is for SMEs, it's very difficult for growing Australian companies to secure debt funding. So really that puts it out of reach for a large number of growing Australian companies. We've got the self-funded growth. Obviously that's not always an option if they're growing rapidly. Obviously those cash reserves there aren't always available to be put towards growth. Then we move on to equity funding. Now if we look at equity funding, it's certainly very doable for Australian SMEs, but it's something that's not widely known. So that's the beauty of going through the ASSOB process, that at the end of the day you have got a really viable option here in terms of the equity funding, but it's still something that's not overly known by the SME end of the market. That's more thought of really in terms of the big end of town. What ASSOB has done is really bring the equity funding in a cost-effective and time-effective way to growing Australian companies. So that covers off really, I guess, the options for growing Australian companies in terms of the funding. If we move on to the business model of ASSOB, again, we don't take an equity position in the companies because we see that really at this point in their growth they're quite vulnerable. So what we're interested in is seeing the founders retain their fair share of the equity while they're in this growth phase. So our business model is really predicated upon seeing those companies raise their capital in as timely fashion as possible.